again for being here. And please feel free to listen to the next speaker. You heard about her already, Rikia Saddy. I think you are back here with us, or because I thought you were out for a short moment. Are you here, Rikia? I see you're online, but here you are. So after from the favelas, we just go to, where are you from now, or where are you living now?
I'm living in Vancouver.
So we jump from down up north a bit west, and welcome. The stage is yours. I think you have heard some presentation. You know where to go. Feel free. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Rikia. I live in Vancouver right now. I too grew up in a small town. I think this is the thing. 2,000 people. I remember the big thrill in grade 12. We got a traffic light. It was exciting. And then I ended up living in London and Paris and New York. I also went to grad school in Arizona at a school called Thunderbird, an international business school that's part of ASU now. And then I started an advertising career with the Saatchi network in New York. I had the most amazing job of my life, reporting to 156 countries, 156 CEOs in 147 countries. And that was at about, I think, 23 years old or something, 24 years old, building this global network out of a bunch of agencies that they had just bought worldwide. I managed to turn that into working in the arts, working in business. And for the last 20 years, I've had my own consulting firm, advising organizations worldwide, from major corporations to not-for-profits, to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, doing lots of public speaking. I got to give a presentation at the Global Youth Assembly called Marketing for Good, Not Evil, which I just highly recommend you all do. Not my talk, but I recommend that you try and work for good, not evil, as much as you can. And I'm guessing if you're here, you probably already are. So if you look down below, there's a little reactions button with a thumbs up emoji or not. I'm going to start by asking you a question. Since we're looking at your futures, but you know, they say that you can only live a life forward, but it only makes sense looking back. You just take one adventure after the next, and it makes no sense. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh yeah, it all adds up. There's a great book by John Irving, A Prayer for Owen Meany, that sums that up so well. I think of that all the time when I find myself in a situation that something 20 years ago prepared me for, but I didn't know it at the time. So my question is this: how many of you have an expectation of what you want to be when you grow up that has been imposed by someone else, or that someone else has expectations of who you will be or what is expected of you? You can give a thumbs up or if that's you. And I think that this is really important because I was meant to be a lawyer. I was a provincial debate champion over and over. I won awards in debate at the national level. My father was a lawyer, and you know how they have companies like Sheffield and Sons? I'm an only child, so I'm the son and daughter in my family, and he had the letterhead already made up, Sadie and daughter, for his law firm, and that's exactly where I was expected to go. And it was the 80s, and I looked around at my friends who were going to law school, and I thought they'd never been in a law office. I worked in one every summer. They didn't know what a lawyer did all day. It wasn't going to suit their personalities, and they were going to be really unhappy people. And I didn't want to spend my life working with unhappy people. And I can't believe that I made that call at 19. Maybe it was a huge family scandal, but my father, who's Muslim, he was the first Muslim QC in Canada and later became the first Muslim judge. I was visiting a business school in Arizona called Thunderbird, and there were students from all over the world. And the minute that I passed a pot of people from 7 different countries, all conversing with each other in Chinese, I thought, or in Mandarin, but these are my people. This is where I belong. And I ended up finding out that they had an advertising program there, growing up again, where I didn't know that that was an option. We got the usual doctor, lawyer, nurse, teacher. And I won a global advertising competition. And afterwards, my father took me aside and said, always trust your instincts. They won't steer you wrong. And so if there's one thing I want to leave you with, it's that. There's absolutely anything that you can do. And I'm going to give you some advice on how you can. But you're going to have those moments when you know you're right. And maybe everybody disagrees with you, but you know. And those are the moments that you have to listen to, because they will give you the next clue of the next step of where you need to be. So another question I have for you is, has something you dream of been shut down by someone else, whether implicitly or explicitly? And implicitly means they kind of implied it, they suggested, or maybe they came right out. I accidentally got muted, sorry. But this is important, because the truth is, from where you sit, and actually for many people of my generation, where we sit, we look at the world and change is happening so fast. And we wonder, what are we supposed to do next? And how can I make a difference? And I'm just one voice in 7 billion, 8 billion people. How am I going to make my mark? But the fact is, you're here now because you have something to contribute. And everything that you are, the good you've been through, the bad you've been through, there is no such thing as a damaged person, because whatever experiences you have had to this day have made you the person you are, and the world needs those gifts. I can guarantee it. And there's a theory that each generation is given the problems that it's meant to solve. And if a generation doesn't solve those problems and punts them to the next generation, it can cause some issues. So for example, we're still dealing with equality issues that should have been dealt with at least decades, if not centuries or millennia ago. So a lot of these issues are coming to a head. And so I want to ask you one last question, which is, raise your hand if you think that things could be better in the world. Because the fact is, this is actually the most exciting time to be alive, because it is a time of change, and change scares people. It scares us so much. But the fact is, if you look at nature, and we're a part of nature, and we forget that, but if you look at nature, change is a constant. The trees, the leaves fall off, and then the buds come out and they turn green and then yellow and then orange and then red, and the trees fall off. We go through these cycles of change in our life, and only when we resist that change, only when we fear that change, do we get that kind of backlog or constipation of progress and evolution that the world needs. So you guys are so perfectly poised. Honestly, your futures couldn't look brighter. I'm going to leave some time for you to ask me some questions, but I want to give a bit of advice on, okay, great, change is good. I need to move forward. There's tons of opportunity. I mean, if, you know, a girl from High Prairie can end up meeting at conferences of world leaders or on global boards, then how, you know, surely if I can do it, you can do it, right? Never envy anyone. If you see someone who has something that you want, that is only proof that it can be done, that it's a solved problem. So don't waste a bit of energy on envy, because that's a waste of time. Go, I want that. That's something else I can add to my quiver of arrows that I want to achieve. And then your life is going to be fantastic. So some practical ideas that I have are this. When I was young, we didn't have like all the information of the world in our back pocket. I still have a document that I kept from grad school. It's how to do research. And, you know, it lists like important libraries and global organizations and how you call up, and you might need 7 or 8 phone calls to get to the right person who might have the one piece of data that you need. You guys have it all in 30 seconds. So, well, milliseconds. So that's not the issue. But what you have now is all the top learning of the world in your back pocket. And it used to be that we had to go to universities because that's where the knowledge was. The knowledge was sitting in the books in the library. The knowledge was in the top professors that university could attract. But now all the top universities of the world have put their courses online for free. They're called Moocs, massive open online communities. You might know them like Coursera or edX, or there's many of them. But seriously, Ivy League universities, the top universities, anything you want to learn from anyone, you could be learning right now. So there's content consumption and there's content creation. I say both are valid and valuable as long as they're exposing you to bigger things, like reading someone's biography. You know, if someone has lived a successful life of 60, 70, 80 years, and they distill all that wisdom into a book, well, it, you know, behooves you to read it. It would be kind of crazy not to, right? It's like almost free. So it's the same thing with these MOOCs, because MIT has taken it one step further, and they have a bunch of graduate students translating these courses to the high school level. So it doesn't matter now if you're in a small town with professors who maybe didn't even go to university. I had that, but you can learn from the top people in the world. So take as many Moocs as you can. I'm still doing it all the time. Number 2, volunteer. And you can volunteer at a not-for-profit, but you can also volunteer at a for-profit. And I have a strong belief that volunteering is better than getting a low-paying job or an entry-level job at one of those organizations. Because when you are being paid, even if it's minimum wage, they can tell you to do it, like sit in the corner for 3 days and just do data entry, or 30 days because we're paying you for it. But when you're a volunteer, it's a reciprocal relationship. And so we feel a need to give you some opportunities along with in exchange for the work that you're doing. And you have a chance to really rise up if you work hard as a volunteer. So I say, get a job at a restaurant to make your money and volunteer for an organization you love or admire. Because when it does come time to hire, they're going to look at the people who already have organizational knowledge around them. And that's where they'll begin their search. The third thing is the power of the informational interview. Science has shown that if you do a favor for someone, you're more likely to do the second favor for someone. So make sure the first favor someone does for you is accept an informational interview. And I can tell you, as a senior executive, if someone calls up asking for a job, it makes you feel bad because you probably don't have one and you don't like to say no to people and you like to be helpful. And so there's some anxiety around interviewing and being asked for a job. But if a young person sends you an email or a letter or calls you and says, I'm really interested in your field and what you've done and what your career has shown you, would you mind giving me 15 minutes of your time to talk to me about how I might be able to do something like that as well? Well, you've done 2 things. You've taken the pressure off because they can give you something that doesn't cost that much. We all have 15 minutes of time. And number 2, once you get people talking about themselves, they'll give you an hour. There's no doubt. And again, they've now done the favor for you of meeting with you so that when you send them a beautiful thank you note, which I know you will, and when they do hear about an opening or an opportunity or they're looking for someone, you will be the first person at the top of their mind. And at the very least, you're building your network. You know, maybe now that this introduction has happened, you can keep an eye out for opportunities for them. And they can, you can do a favor for them. And networks aren't just people you meet at conferences. In fact, that's very little. It's about people that you build relationships with. And how do we build relationships? We build relationships by caring. We help people, they help us, we become friends, we have a relationship, and we get in this upward spiral of growth and happiness. So Moocs, volunteering, and informational interviews, I think, are the 3 greatest things you can do to build the life that you want and still leave lots of time for fun. And you might have fun doing it.
Well, thank you very much, Rikia. I would like to add a 4th point, actually. You mentioned
Please do.
And the 4th point is actually you got to know Rikia. And that's actually the most important of the 4 points, because she can give you not only maybe tell you what MOOCs are interesting or where you have to volunteer. She is also whatever head of a company. She can give to you 30 minutes of her time, and she gave you so much advice about how to go. So that's the 4th point, which is even more important than any university degree. So thank you very, very much for your presentation. Let's have a look what the teenager want to tell you about the 4 points, bringing them ahead. Any questions from the teenagers?
Yeah. What were the challenges that you faced?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think, like a lot of women, tons of self-doubt. And I'm sure men have this too. I've raised 2 teenage sons, or I'm in the process of it. But really, I read an article in Harvard Business Review that a man will apply for a job if he has only 50% of the qualifications, but a woman feels like she needs 80 to 100% of the like she has to have already excelled at the job before she could deserve to start the job. And questioning myself was foolish. I think not believing in the power of my youth was foolish. and I don't know if that still exists, but youth is more revered now than it was when I was starting out. I grew up in the shadow of the baby boomers, and I felt like they had all the wisdom and all the expertise, and maybe I should fetch coffee for a few years to earn my place at the table. But what I've come to learn is that who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it is your right to be at the table. I grew up in a Muslim, Catholic, Jewish family. So, and I went to Anglican Sunday school. So I always had this sense of being the outsider in the room, right? Whether it was because I was often the youngest person. I finished university at 19, very young. So I was kind of always that person who thought that I was too young to be in the table. But the fact is, there is such a love and respect and admiration for youth right now, because there's an understanding globally in the zeitgeist that the new, fresh ideas are coming from young people, that the new, fresh ideas are coming from people of color, Black people, Indigenous people, that there are traditional wisdoms and teachings that we have grown up with at our grandmother's side that are now valuable in the boardroom. So really, I guess I want to say, never feel like you're different, because those differences, that diversity is your right to be in the room, because it's bringing the voice that needs to be heard at that time, or you wouldn't be there. So I hope that helps. Really, all the things I had to overcome were my own. It was doubting myself. It was not thinking that I should be there. It was playing small. Don't waste your time on that. It's not worth it.
Rikia, it's
Yes.
very insightful when you tell your story. So I want to ask a question. What was the biggest challenge that you faced, and how did you deal with it?
Isn't it funny? I'm such an optimist. I mean, I can tell you a hard knock tale of my life, but I can also tell you a tale of my life of how shockingly lucky and fortunate I've been. And that's where my mind is always in order to move forward. So I almost never look back at failures. I mean, I'm so lucky, some of the things that I've accomplished, right? I got angry reading a newspaper article. Okay, picture me, I'm a mom, I've got young kids and a company, and I'm exhausted, and I have no time for myself, and I'm reading the newspaper, and we were at war in Afghanistan, and the head of the Canadian Armed Forces had published an article saying, you know, being really tough, like, we're not humanitarians, we're here to kill people. And I'm like, wait a minute, Afghanistan was the greatest recipient of our foreign aid. That's insane. So I write an op-ed piece. No one will publish it. Who knows me out in Vancouver? Finally, an online publication called The Tyee, they pick it up and they pay me $100. I'm thinking, this is fantastic. I write a whole bunch more. I take on education reform. I take on Norwegian study of democracy. I take on all of these things. And suddenly the CBC, which is like our BBC, comes calling because they're trying to do this series called The Great Canadians, and they're looking for someone to represent Western Canada. Well, I grew up in Alberta, which is kind of like Canada's Texas, and I live in British Columbia, which is a little bit like Canada's California. And who do they call to try and find somebody? But the editor of this online publication that I've been writing these things for. So all of a sudden I'm in Quebec and I'm meeting global leaders. And that's when I first met Justin Trudeau. And I'm doing, like, I mean, the phone will just ring. I'm sorry, you stay true to who you are. You fight for what you believe in. And in our family, we have a couple of rules. One is, if it's not a mistake, if you learn from it, then it's a lesson. And the other one is, put yourself out there. Just put yourself, my husband has like 5 albums, and we just keep creating things and putting them out in the world. And there's more opportunity to do that than ever, because this experience in Quebec made me realize that in Quebec, they were learning a different Canadian history than we were learning out west, which makes it very hard to hold a country together. So then I decided to write a book called We Are Canada that told the stories from like a multicultural perspective. And I heard from thousands of Canadian youth who thanked me for like, you know, coming from a multicultural background and representing us and writing themselves into Canadian history for the first time. And then I ended up with Justin Trudeau speaking at my book launch. And then I ended up with a book tour. And then I ended, like, if you just stay true to who you are and you're brave and you put your ideas and your creations out there, and maybe they're not so good at first, and you ask for feedback. I learned that one from a CEO, a young CEO I advised who admires Oprah Winfrey. He idolizes her, and he said that that after every interview she'll say, "How did I do? What could I have done better? What could I learn? How could I improve?" And if you're willing to be vulnerable like that, and you're willing to learn from your mistakes, frankly, they just disappear, because it was hard to get a publisher, and I got rejected 1,000,000 times, and nobody believed in me, and all of those things happen, but they don't shape your life. They're just the road bumps on the way to what you want. Does that help? Could I have done it better?
Yes. Amazing. Wonderful, Rikia. Thank you for your talk.
Seriously, if a girl from High Prairie can find herself at the Global Progress Conference, or meeting with world leaders, or having important people read what she writes, or inspiring teenagers, you know, to read her book, I mean, anybody can do anything. Anything.
That's a nice actually also ending of the conversation with us. It's really fantastic what you said. I think I even hear, I see Adam, which was the previous speaker, is still here, and I think the way he's looking, he say, yeah, you didn't miss a single word of you. I was watching on his cam. He's walking around. I think it's not the favelas, but he's in the jungle now, I guess, or.
I just friended Adam on LinkedIn. I loved his talk.
This is the favela here. You can see up here, this is the community, and it looks out over the ocean here. So we're actually in the forest, inside the urban slum, and inside the middle of the city at the same time.
Wow. So anyway, we are from the favelas to Canada, to wherever, to Switzerland, here to Mozambique, with one of the participants, a global community at the moment. I think the words or the votes and the presentation we had now, it was really part of all of it. But now it's time actually for the kids again, for the teenager. Thank you very much for your presentation. Rikia, feel free to stay with us, but 10 minutes I think we give to the kids to just relax a moment, just to think about something else, and then we will just come to Shelley, which joined already in about 10 minutes time, okay?